started Passive House in 2009. I was in the second training, and with fear of being long-winded, I do feel it is a good story. I was actually at the the Green Building Council conference in Boston, and I found Mike and Kat standing at their little Passive House booth at that conference, and I was talking to them and said, "Oh, maybe I'll come to that conference next year." And Mike said to me, "You should come to the training." And so I went back to my hotel in Boston and booked a flight to go to Chicago the next weekend. So I went back to Halifax, and I went down to Urbana the next weekend. So, and it was the second training that they had done in Passive House. So we started off as a design build firm, and over the years as we've gotten busier with design, we've transitioned to working with other builders. And I've kind of lost count, but I know we've worked with more than 35 builders that there's first time building a Passive House. So that's been an interesting process. The company's now owned by myself and Mike Anderson, who's an architecture graduate. And we're a little team of 10. We just added 3 people in the last couple of months. It's been extremely busy this year since the fall. And Liz is on with us tonight as one of our newest employees, part of the team. We have worked exclusively, I'm just trying to find a spot for this to get out of my way. There we go. We've worked exclusively on Passive House projects over the last 12 years, and we've completed over 200 projects to date. I counted them up for something else, and we completed 53 projects last year. So a lot of work for our little team. We've certified 14 projects with FIAS, and over the last years provided the FIAS builder training across Canada. That's all gone online now, which makes it a lot more accessible for folks. So I'll be doing some of that teaching with Dan Whitmar's group going forward. And one of the things that we talk about a lot, it's a constant kind of conversation between our group, is how do we get people in the mainstream new home construction market to build a Passive House? And so this is just kind of my brain dump based on my own personal experience over the last 12 years. I know there's lots of ways to skin the cat, as the expression goes, but this is the direction that we've gone. So we kind of have identified kind of 2 separate problems to making this happen. So how do we get people with deep pockets, I call them the wealthy, the rich and famous sometimes, to care about saving energy and care for the planet? And the other demographic that we work a lot with is young people, and they care about saving energy and energy security and doing right by the planet, but they have limited budgets. And I call them the most people. So what are the barriers that we've heard over the last few years? And this will be familiar for most of you here. I don't want to give up anything. My steam shower, my hot tub, the list can go on. Will it look weird? Have no windows, be the Passive House prison, etc. Will I have problems with new stuff, new equipment, different suppliers? Who can build it? Probably the second question we hear from clients is who can build it. The first one we hear is typically, can we afford it? And then the last one is probably the hardest to overcome, is I've never heard of it. So those are the main barriers that we see that we have to get buy-in into the mainstream. And the problem is kind of a little bit different in my mind. So what we've experienced is people that can afford to build new homes in general, energy bills really mean nothing to them. You know, the monthly cost of $500 or $600 a month spent on energy is a very small part of their family budget, and saving on their monthly energy costs really mean nothing to them. They often are pretty interested in bragging rights, and are more interested in certifying. And their main motivation that we find is doing the right thing for the planet. So and sure, they'll buy into the other comfort benefits of passive house, but we find the main motivator if someone is on the high budget is going to make a passive house. Their motivation is to be responsible environmentally. We find that net zero is more sexy than passive house. It's sort of like the Tesla compared to the Toyota Corolla, which is a super fuel efficient car, but really not very sexy. And what we found with this segment of the market is it requires a lot of mission work. You got to get out there and be promoting passive house and the benefits other than just cost. And that work is unpaid. So as many of us in small companies trying to eke out a living doing this work that we love, unpaid mission work can drain your resources. With the most people problem, typically they're already interested in passive house, but can they even afford a code built house? Can they build a new house, afford to build a new house at all? And we're seeing really, I'm sure everyone is seeing really huge increases in material costs with COVID. Lumber went up 300% last year here in Nova Scotia. The numbers have to make sense. And this is tricky because it varies across regions. So regional costs we find can drastically vary. How much a ductless mini split costs in Toronto is more than double what we pay for it here. And whether or not in Nova Scotia, for instance, we don't really need any cooling. So we don't need central HVAC systems, which really helps make our numbers work. Whereas in Toronto, the cooling loads are higher than the heating loads in a passive house. Good design can save a ton of costs. And we had one of our builders build one of our designs, and he was trying to get his mother-in-law to go ahead and do one of those. And she was like, I can get a free plan from the Home Hardware building supply. And she did that, and her roof trusses cost $21,000. And normally we would probably say, $5,000 or $6,000 for that size house for roof trusses. So just being smart about design can help save some of that building cost and move that towards the upgrades towards passive house. We think using locally available materials and trades is critical to getting into the mainstream. I know that there's some awesome imported products, and now that we do have a 745 outlet in Canada, there's better access to those things. But most trying to specify new materials, it has been a barrier that we see resistance from the builders. And most of these, the most people problem also is they can't afford certification. They're not able to move to that. And with some of the rebates we have in Canada, certification costs the same as the number of solar panels you need to get to net zero. So it's a hard justification on certification. And most of these folks are already sold on the idea of passive house. They've done their research, they've digested a lot of information. So it's, for us, it's making this work for them financially. So this is just a very high level, what are our main cost drivers? Being smart about the site. If clients are out looking for a site, is there shading and require clearing, or is there shading that's not controlled on the lot because it's a building, or trees on the neighbor's lot can have an impact on cost. You have clearing, but you also may have to use more strategies to improve the efficiency because you can't get any solar gains. Grade is a big one for us. We're usually building slab on grade, and if we have a lot of grade across the site, we can spend quite a significant amount on fill, often more than all the upgrades of passive house put together. There's the upfront costs of architectural fees, energy consulting fees, engineering for things like foundations bearing on foam insulation, etc., and certification fees. And then in construction, the the big ones are upgraded assemblies, air sealing, upgraded doors and windows, and mechanical systems. So those are kind of our three areas that we're trying to address from a cost perspective. And one of the things that we decided to do about 5 years ago, because we noticed we had a lot of conversations with folks about passive house, and a hurdle for them was the upfront costs. And the reason for that, a big part of the reason for that was they couldn't roll it into their mortgage. So coming up with $20,000 or $50,000 to design a custom home just made it unachievable for them. So we made a commitment to design some ready-made passive house stock plans, and it was about 5 years ago that we made that decision. And we made a commitment to energy model all the plans. They're designed for solar orientation, to use simple assemblies, to have them be designed for buildability, simple for a builder to pick up and execute, to use North American made materials and equipment, and helping reduce soft costs and providing a quicker timeline in when someone can get ready to start their construction. We were really fortunate in that there's an organization here in Canada, National Research Council, that funds research and has an interest in energy efficiency as part of their focus. So we got a grant from the National Research Council that allowed us to do a lot of costing, energy modeling, and WUFI moisture profiling to test the assemblies across all the climates. So that work kind of boiled us down to three ways to approach our assembly. So the roof, we use stick-built roof trusses with blown-in cellulose. Our stock plans use a frost stem wall foundation with a slab on grade using EPS insulation. And then the walls, we settled on a double stud, a form of the double stud approach to the construction. And for us, the wall is kind of the holy grail. That the roof is pretty easy, the foundation's pretty easy, but there's a lot more factors that really influence our decision on how we're going to build a wall. And I'm going to run through these pretty quickly because I want to stay on time if I can. We wanted our walls to accept all siding types, so we needed a nailing-based sheathing on the outside. We wanted to be able to air seal from the inside. We live in a very, one of our profs described it as a freezing jungle. We have a long winter and we have a lot of moisture. So air sealing on the outside is really a challenge in our climate and many Canadian climates. We wanted a durable, continuous, simple air sealing details as part of the wall assembly. We wanted to use materials that were widely available from local suppliers. Go to your building supply place. We wanted a code-built structure so that we didn't have any engineering required. And we wanted to be able to easily vary the insulation levels so that we didn't have to redimension all the plans to make a thicker wall for Edmonton compared to the climate, say, in Vancouver. We wanted solid building science across all the heating dominated clients. And this was really interesting for us when we did WUFI analysis of assemblies. A wall that is really good in Edmonton fails in St. John's, Newfoundland, and vice versa. So trying to find a balance where we didn't have to change how much inside, how much outside, to achieve good building science in the assembly was also important. And then of course, no thermal bridging in that. And also considering low global warming potential materials and less embodied energy materials. So it's a pretty long list, and the approach, and then we also throw in cost, which isn't on this list. Our approach to construction cost, our goal is to build passive house for the same cost as a code built house. And really what we're trying to do, right from the beginning, we started with this goal to use locally available materials put them together in different ways to create a passive house, but have those be materials and equipment that the trades are already familiar with. We found that getting buy-in from the builders was greatly improved if we could do this. As soon as we started telling them we're importing things, they think callback. So here's a few examples of stock plans that we have built. This is pardon me, a little duplex that I built in Cape Breton for my parents who are 89 and 90 to move out of their home and have accessibility and be warm because they're always cold. This was a stock plan that we built and on spec and sold because we wanted to demonstrate that a passive house would be worth more in a market than a code built house. We built it on a new street where all the rest of the houses were code built. It was a little bit smaller, but we sold it for $30,000 more than the other houses on the street. This is a stock plan built in Ontario that's off grid, uses a big solar array and a little bit of propane. And then we've also done a number of custom homes. So this is a certified passive house that's also has enough solar now on the roof to be net zero. This was a project we took down to the foundation and then rebuilt in a very traditional neighborhood in the city of Halifax. This is a certified passive house also in Halifax. And this one of our newer projects, a beautiful site right on the ocean in the South Shore, stunning views, and a fairly expensive, fancy, as we would call fancy house. So that's it for me for presentation, and I am very